So I will ask everyone, all the beautiful people here, to remind me about when time's over, because I know we're a little bit limited for time, and I know there's a million questions we all have, and I know we're all inspired because this is the first time I'm watching this film. So I wanted to thank you and your team and all the people involved for making this film happen. Wow.
I can see a lot of deaf names up there as well, which is really
Yes.
great. You'll see a lot of the people that you know from the community who worked
Thank
on this
you.
project.
And just a heads up, I have my phone here because I have some questions written down. I don't want to get too off topic. Okay. All right, so my goal tonight is for us two to have a conversation first, and then if we have time for audience Q&A, and I know it's a little hard to see, so please have some patience. We're going to have to sign for each other, make sure everyone knows what we're talking about. So are you okay with that? All right. Okay, so I'm curious. Many of us have the same feeling. So why now? Why did you decide on, what inspired you to make this film now? And this moment in our history, and not just for deaf history, but for disabled rights in general, and American history and world history and all these parallel. What made you decide in 2025, right? Why now?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. It's funny, when I got into this industry about 10 years ago, things were very different. I had started sort of out on an acting path and then ended up in reality TV. And I had met with so many writers and producers and directors who always said the same thing. They loved the idea of working with me. They loved the idea of incorporating ASL in our community into storylines. And, they loved writing something together. But the real question became how? And that all came down to a singular concept of authenticity. How do you authentically tell a story from a community that you're not a part of? And Gallaudet University is so incredibly unique in so many ways. For me, growing up in a fourth-generation deaf family, going to deaf schools, and of course to Gallaudet, the first time that I was really outside of the of the deaf world was really in Hollywood. And this is such an important civil rights movement within our world, and was big news back in the late 80s, but so many people who are hearing don't know. And it felt just timely that I showed this experience as well as what the deaf experience looked like. My work has started with Deaf U, which went to Netflix, as well as Audible, which was nominated for an Oscar, and now this, which has been such an incredible journey, and it's been a great way to show our culture and our community, but it's definitely been building brick by brick. I think this is a project that gives me an opportunity to show more of a background of the deaf community overall. So that's the long and short of it.
Wonderful, wonderful, great. So if you don't mind sharing, how long did this process take? So you decide until finishing, and I know you had to collect all this footage, and how complicated was that process for you and your team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this project actually, now it's been a little over 6 years. I initially met with a producer by the name of Jonathan King, who is absolutely brilliant. He worked on the Green Book, as well as a few other incredible projects that have found homes at Netflix. And when we first looked at this project, especially with his background in film, we felt that this would be a really good idea in terms of a scripted piece. And not knowing so much of the history, I pitched this to him, and we put together a package that would include 2 writers that we hired, who one was hearing, one was deaf. And when they initially delivered the first few drafts of the script, the story just didn't feel as rich or as weighted as it really should have been. And with the more feedback that we provided, we just felt that it was impossible to truncate this incredible story into the limitations of a script. This isn't something that can be simplified. This isn't as simple as, we wanted a deaf president and we got it. We have to go back hundreds and hundreds of years to examine not only oralism, but the discrimination and the oppression that we faced as a community, as well as the years of hearing paternalism within the Gallaudet community. And so when we decided on a doc, we realized that the rules had sort of changed. With these 4 students and focusing on them specifically, we were able to touch on things like Alexander Graham Bell, their own family histories, the work of protests that had been done before. Whereas, a scripted series or, even a mini series, just while it might have come close, could have never done what we did with the doc. So when I met with Davis Guggenheim, the co-director of this film, the biggest question surrounding whether or not we could make it a doc was about the archive, right? We weren't sure how many people had captured these moments. And, growing up in a deaf family, I had seen the same clips again and again and again, but we weren't sure just how much had been really collected and, archived. When Gallaudet very generously allowed us into their archive, they gave us some over 40 hours of footage that were covered in dust. Those reels had been in storage for a very long time, but it gave us such a rich library to work from and be able to tell this story. Obviously, Deaf President Now includes so many key players. So many people played a role in contributing to this movement, but many people would be curious as to why we focused on these 4 students singularly. And it was because we didn't want to muddy the story, right? We wanted to keep it strictly to the heart of what this movement was. Those 4 students really allowed us sort of a limited lens in many ways, but also a way for us to peel back those layers in a way that would be digestible for audiences. And, as well, we included I. King Jordan, but we chose to keep it at that.
Actually, it was possible to have another because you said it wasn't just one story, not just one moment, but it's a lot. And we have these 4 main characters, of course, but what's next? Maybe we can pitch and have another type and more different perspectives and different students and different lenses. We see that there was a shift on campus.
Right.
And at that time, we didn't have these things, these cell phones at the time. So how people had to communicate, they had to get creative. And it was really cool to see. It was a good reminder of what we used to have and what we have right now. So it was really interesting to see the people just stand up and fight for what's right and speak up and take action and do something. And they found a way. And they said that we can't, and they got together and they strategized, and that was really powerful to see how they did that, and it was a good way to capture it. Even though these 4 students, they're very diverse, very different, and what they want is also diverse and different, but they still found a way to, get together and understand that this is way bigger than me. It's what does the systems call for, and we're stronger together. And this was a great way to show that. Right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I think that, this story is incredibly timely and relevant, especially with the political climate that we're facing today. People now see that protest isn't really successful anymore, and they don't, I think, really see change as possible. But I think this film tells a very different story, that change is in fact possible through collective action. These 4 deaf individuals, even though they had almost polarized opinions, were all working in support of a common goal, right? I wanted to show in this film that while they did have their internal conflicts, what was key was that they were working against a larger systemic issue. And I think that really speaks to a truth that many students are trying to realize at colleges and universities around the world right now. These are issues that, we are looking to solve, but our own internal issues are something that oftentimes we do have to set on the back burner. While we have differences, that doesn't mean that we should draw that line in the sand and say that we can't work together. It really is about a larger goal, and I would hope at least that audiences would leave with that in mind. That we could think about this in a very new, sort of fresh light, and that we actually can mobilize together.
Yes, work through agreements and work through the disagreements as well. And everyone has their opinions, and that's okay. But when we get together, we have to think about what the human rights are and that experience for many people as well. Anyways, I do have one question before we open it to the audience. So from this film, was there any moment in your research, did you feel really mind blown and that made it in there, and then stuff that maybe didn't make it in there? And was there something that you just had no idea about and you saw it and you felt so emotional and you had to? I mean, yes, you shared all of this, but is there any moment, any specific film or footage or something that really impacted you?
Mm, that is such an excellent question. You know, when Gallaudet originally gave us this footage, there was one piece that was quite impactful. The story of Deaf President Now centers so much around Spillman saying deaf people are not ready to function in a hearing world. You know, that really is the heart of this story and very much the fulcrum by which so much of this movement happened. But we don't actually have evidence of that moment. It doesn't exist. And we were looking for the footage, but what we found is the interview that she did with a reporter where she says, "Did you actually say that?" And Spillman responds, "Well, I was working through an interpreter." And the interviewer says, "Well, did you go home to your house in Virginia?" And Spillman says, "Well, I have 3." And, she immediately follows that up with, "Well, I'm not sure if I said it." That was kind of mind-blowing for me, honestly. I was taken aback. Even when we showed the DPN for this film, the original screener for this, they couldn't believe that had been reported on the news. There was no way to record it back then. And, the lack of technology really sort of changed how it was presented to the world. So they were, the fury was sort of reignited in a lot of ways. Her flippant, just obnoxious ego was kind of mind-blowing.
Wow. And did you share with the 4 of them? Did the 4 of them watch it all together?
Yes.
The whole film? And did you check for their reactions? And I'm
Yeah.
sure they felt like anger from looking back and then seeing it all over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because in the initial interviews, now, prior to the cameras being on, we wanted to touch base with them. And, even though they individually had their own stories, we noticed that they all seemed like we were reading from the same book, right? I mean, it had been 37 years of them talking about this again and again and again and again and again. And so their story had sort of been compacted into this, canned version that was just very easy to regurgitate. And what we realized was that we were going to have to go deeper, right? We needed to include key figures and other moments to really jog their memory and also challenge how they had, framed this over the years. We wanted to ask them questions that would allow them to be vulnerable and really open up the story. And as we had more and more footage, we were able to really open up the conversation with them. And it's funny, in interviewing them, it felt like they were reliving it. At one point, Bridgetta, actually, she was on the edge of her seat and she said, "Did we win or did we not?" Right? Because she felt like she was seeing it during the screener for the first time. And afterwards, I remember, she came to me and said, after we saw this archive and after sort of reliving those moments, I have memories that I completely forgot even existed, but I've revisited them again and I'd love to invite you into them. So we're very thankful to the 4 of them for that.
I think that's really powerful. You're able to give people an opportunity to relive, and also it's a reminder of that moment. You say, because over time it becomes normal and condensed, but no, wait a second, we actually did that. That actually happened. Like, pinch me, I'm awake. This actually happened. So there's a huge shift and a huge reminder to the community that this actually happened.
Well, and actually, just to add to that, so Greg actually has a hearing son who's a CODA who is fluent in sign. He's 17. We asked him to come and see the film. And it's funny, actually, afterwards, he was sort of shocked that his father had led this protest at 20 years old. I mean, it was so different than what he had expected. He couldn't believe that he had gone on, places like Nightline and, to Congress. Of course, we in the community hear the same story again and again and again, but to see it really hands-on, it was incredibly powerful, I think, even for his own child.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So now I wanted to turn it over to the audience to see if we have any questions or comments. And I know we're a little bit limited on time, but I wanted to take advantage and hear your thoughts and your reactions and your experiences. So the DPN4, did you
So with the DPN4, when you were interviewing them, were they all in the same room at the same time?
That's a great question. So in DC, actually, we interviewed 3 of them in the basement of Gallaudet. One was in St. Louis. We did have them all in the same room, and then we ended up separating them, and they ended up all missing each other. And
Was that intentional? You didn't want anyone to influence each other? Like I wanted their own account, raw account?
yeah, no, it was because way before the interviews even started on camera, as I mentioned, we had a conversation with all 4 of them at the same time, and they were very withholding. They were like, we all got along so well, and we collaborated. And I was like, I know that's not the case. I know there were feelings amongst you. So once we actually got them alone and interviewed them one by one, the story really came to life.
I really appreciate that level of honesty and authenticity to see the individuals and their all stories and their individual feelings and their expressions, and you can see their heart and their thoughts. It's really inspiring.
Well, how we structured it was very important. So I had worked with Davis, who was in front with them and was asking questions about specifically the deaf experience. But throughout the interview, there were moments where I would go in and pull more out, right? Those things that are only really seen through a deaf lens. And anytime that Davis would be, trying to dig deeper and deeper into the story, I would notice that as deaf folks, they would sort of shut down those moments. And I noticed that there were feelings of, or maybe levels of trepidation. And in those moments, I was able to text Davis and say, this is a place where they can be vulnerable. This is a place where not only are they safe to talk about the story, but can really extrapolate.
Yeah, you kind of show like a team agreement, kind of get the temperature, but it was great. Anyways, any more questions from the audience?
Very much so. I don't mind voicing. Hello. Hi, Nyle. Hi, it's Sticky Hearts. First of all, I just want to say congratulations from one deaf filmmaker to another deaf filmmaker. Congratulations. Congratulations. This is more of a statement. In watching this film, I really was impacted by the message of, the deaf father who is placed in the basement. And, that really brought a lot of feelings up and really tears to my eyes. By the end of this film, I couldn't stop crying. The strength, the resiliency, the power of this film. I think this film really is, something that validates so much of our experience, our existence, who we are, what we experience as deaf people every day. And I really think that this is a way that, deaf Americans should be feeling. And so I just want to say a huge thank you for creating this film and uplifting our community. This is such a deep dive. Profound, thank you. This is such a deep, profound impact that this film has been able to bring not only to deaf community, but to the larger world. And, I do feel like this is something as a resource that I can refer other folks to be able to better understand us. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That, honestly, Dickie, that means so much. The experience of the parents of the deaf president, now 4, was really paramount for us. We wanted to show that because Deaf President Now wasn't just a simple protest to assign a deaf president and to appoint someone new. It was about generational trauma and the history of discrimination and oppression that our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents had all felt. It was about seeing their successes and being able to support what they had experienced. But also it was about seeing that through a lens that provided us the knowledge that change is possible, right? This was a film that I wanted to make to show deaf people this is doable, and I'm incredibly proud to be a part of it. That was one of the biggest struggles that we had in terms of scripted versus unscripted. We didn't want this to feel soapy or forced or over dramatized. We wanted to just show this can work.
Yeah, I wanted to add that you're talking about the generational trauma and how it affects everyone, but how they saw that they felt hope. And it was a good job of encapsulating what hope looks like, and it gives space for both. Because, being a deaf human, it's not just one experience. It's not, you feel like it's not just one. You internalize a lot of different things. Everything affects everything else. So, there's many things we should really appreciate that we have the opportunity to look back and move forward as well. And, you had the grandfather story and the son and all the different protests, and you see the older generation, the younger generation in the different spaces. And now look at how we all are now with this beautiful, diverse audience from different generations, and it's really nice. So, any more questions while we have time still?
Right over here. Hey, Isadora. I know that this work wasn't easy behind the scenes. I know that it was very challenging. But, in 1988, we were kids.
He wasn't
Or
born
not
yet.
even born yet.
Not born yet.
Yeah, I'd be curious how we would feel at that time. I'm curious how your experiences fare now versus back then. While I was born the following year, I was actually born in East Queens here in New York. I remember being 6 years old, 7 years old, and, well, to give you a little bit more context, right? So when that happened, there still were, when DPN happened, there were still protests happening at other deaf schools around the country, right? I remember, at 6 years old going into kindergarten at Lexington School for the Deaf, my mother still having to rally for, the empowerment of deaf educators and for the appointment of deaf folks on the administration board. And that was something that was very powerful for me. It was something that I really learned a lot from, and I think I gleaned a lot of the work that I do now from seeing what hurt.
Yeah, I think with the diversity, I think that adds that on top of the DPN. When I was young, when I was old enough to remember, I remember watching it on TV, and I read different newspapers, and I knew about it, but I didn't fully understand. I had an okay understanding. But now I definitely remember, what life before captions was, like closed captions. And then it finally became a law where they required it because of ADA. I used to live before that, actually. But now thinking about the different generations and how you mentioned it's getting better and better, and things have improved. But I think it's really important to thank the older generations and what they went through, because of them, we are here now today. And you think we can look in the back and you think that they're done, everything's set, everything's good. No, absolutely not. There's still so much work to do. So this is a great reminder to myself, and it's really important to keep going and re-identify and reinvigorate everyone, and think, no, like if we want change, we can make that happen. As a community, together, we will make it happen, as you saw.
Right.
So again, any last comments?
Yes.
I feel like maybe there's two more. Do we have time for one more? One more. Okay, one more.
Just briefly, I'm curious, with such a diverse audience, I would love to know who is involved with, if anyone here in the audience was involved with DPN.
Can you say that with that in the museum?
If anyone in the audience was involved with DPN. Oh, Deaf President Now, I'm so sorry.
Just one person here was involved with DPN?
Better question maybe is, how many people here are alumni of Gallaudet?
How many Gallaudet alumni are present here tonight? Who went to Gallaudet University? Yay! Very nice. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I want to call that, I think now it's time to wrap up. I just want to say thank you to everyone, of course.